So
Hey,
we're
hey,
back.
everybody.
Oh, you're doing the thing now. Okay. I won't say it
No, you say it. You
now.
know how we roll here.
Before we started the meeting, I was telling Pinky that I went back just yesterday and was looking at last month's video for this,
Uh-huh.
and my favorite part is where we just sit there and we're waiting before we talk, and we're just kind of looking around and people are rolling in. And I was like, watching back the video on YouTube, it just feels funny because you're not like waiting for people to come in. You're like, I'm watching the video and I've stopped staring at weird things.
We should stop doing that, maybe. I don't know. More BS-y
I
right
don't know
now.
what's the other I guess we could just edit the video for YouTube. That might make more sense,
I
right?
think we could do that.
Just cut out that part.
Brandon, help.
Brandon.
All right, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Hackle Box on this very spooky October the 14th. Uh, beautiful day here in Kentucky. Getting a lot of wind. Is it like that for you down there in Tennessee, Pink?
Not today. It has been the last couple days though. It's actually
Yeah.
really calm. Pretty much no humidity. I think it's supposed to be windy later. We've got like a fire warning, so keep an eye out.
Yeah. So Eric is now broadcasting live from a whole new home, a whole new state. How's life in Vancouver?
I was last month too.
Were you?
Yeah.
We didn't mention it.
We don't pay attention to you.
I thought we.
Sorry.
You know what? I don't know. On a completely unrelated note to what you just asked, I did check to see because last month we had issues with chat to see if people could chat, and it was set off again. But I just turned it back on, so everybody should be able to chat. Yep, we got chat coming in. Cool. Yes, I moved to Washington. You keep telling people I live in Vancouver, and if you don't say Vancouver, Washington, people are gonna think I live in Canada. I'm just saying you right now. There's like Erickson in Vancouver, and like people don't know that even Vancouver, Washington exists if they've never been here. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't even cross their mind when you say Vancouver. But
It's
Washington
really
has been
strange.
great. Now we've doxed where I live. You want my address? No, I'm just
Definitely a Canadian spy.
Canadian spy, right? I know.
Yeah.
See, goodness.
It is funny. I've always been aware of Vancouver, Washington, but when you told me you were moving there, like I tell friends, people are like, "Oh yeah, Eric's moving to Vancouver," and they're like, "Oh, he's moving to Canada." Like, no, he's moving to Vancouver, Washington, and literally like half the people are like, "Wait, what? There's a Vancouver in the United States as well?"
Yeah, I had no idea.
And then my favorite part is after they're like, "Oh wow, there's one there too." So it's like, but it's like right there, like in the very northwest. It's right on the other side. And you're like, "Nope, wrong again. It's actually all the way down in the south." Completely.
That was exactly what I thought. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was just like across the border.
I always just say, I don't know the history of it, and I'm not going to bother Googling it. But I imagine that someone was just heading southwest to get to Vancouver, Canada, and then they landed. They like hit like the Columbia River down at the bottom of Washington. And were like, I must be there, and like this is Vancouver, Washington. Like just went far southwest, and they thought they were there. I don't know.
The families got split, right? Half the family accidentally went to Canada, the other half accidentally went to Washington, and they're like, I guess, yeah. What was the disease everybody got on the Oregon Trail? The video game?
Dysentery.
Dysentery. I guess they all got dysentery and didn't make it. Damn.
Probably. I love. Wow, there's a Vancouver, Washington in Canada. Yep, there is.
Yeah, our friends in Minnesota woke up to snow today. Godspeed. You got 6 more months of that. Get used to it. Stay warm.
Yeah. Weather's been beautiful here. I keep like everybody's like, "Oh, you're in Washington now. Like it rains so much there, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, it does rain quite a bit." Like since I've moved here, we've had like 2 days of rain. It's just been beautiful. Kind of weird. I'll take it though.
Yeah, you guys have a almost perfect climate out there, I would say.
At the moment.
Yeah.
Cool.
So continuing the BS-y.
There's no security on today's show. It's just this.
Priorities. We'll get there.
Yeah.
I'm more worried about the Alaska snow crab season being canceled. Did you guys see that?
I did, and I'm also disturbed. I mean, crab's delicious. Like I said earlier, though, and I don't know, maybe we just love the butter, so maybe it's not so much the crab.
I don't care at all. Affects me none. Good. Less things for me to smell and be grossed out by.
So Eric loves seafood. He loves the way it smells. Loves seafood. The odor.
Which is great because I'm in the Pacific Northwest now, and it's a great place for seafood.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I can't stand seafood. It's a childhood trauma. So
I love
Well-
seafood. I love crab. Love crab cakes. Crab cakes are delicious.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this on our team call this morning. I think the only seafood I've ever tried that I'll never touch again is sea urchin. It's the worst thing I've ever attempted to eat, and I apologize if you like it, but you may have something wrong with you.
Yeah, I've never tried that. They scare me though. Sea urchins do. Whenever I'm
Yeah.
in the ocean, I feel like they're gonna poke me. So
So-
I stay away from. I've never thought about eating one, so I won't. But thanks for the advice.
Just a question of, was it spiky? It wasn't spiky when I got it. The consistency was, I'll just say, for any of you who have kids, the first few months of life, that's what the consistency was. If you've experienced that, that little surprise in the diaper. And the flavor, I feel like, was pretty much what that would taste like as well. So,
well,
you
really
don't have to
making
eat
me rethink my seafood stance, though. So
Is that enticing to you?
no, I'm
Yeah,
joking. It's sarcasm, friend.
it.
My goodness.
I don't do sarcasm.
Yeah, right. Okay. I will say though, like I can't stand seafood. Seafood makes me gag. It makes me like literally physically gag, and generally will give me problems. But I love to try to eat it, which is a weird thing. Like I'm a glutton for punishment or something now. I don't know. The reality is that like I know that it's healthy. I know that it's a good source of, good fats and proteins. And so, like I know that I want to be a person who can eat it. And so over the years, I will try different seafood. If I'm with someone and it doesn't smell terribly bad to me, then I will be like, yeah, I'll try that. And then generally that literally turns into me be like, and like having to like use a napkin or something and spit it out or anything like that. But I always try. And our good friend Kyle, oh man, one time I went to a Japanese place with him, sushi and whatnot, but they were all getting sushi and I was just getting like teriyaki udon or something, and they all ordered their different rolls and different things, and we were talking about that and people talking about different things, and I was like, I don't know, some of those smell pretty fishy. Like they're like, you should try this, and I was like, maybe, I don't know. And Kyle goes, you should try my unagi. It doesn't taste fishy at all. And like I trusted Kyle at this point.
Mistake.
And unagi is eel, and eel definitely is extremely fishy. He was completely and totally lying to me, and that was a nearly catastrophic situation at a table right then. I bit into this friggin' thing, and I about lost it. I immediately had to run to the bathroom. It was very rude of him. So anytime he ever says that I've been mean to him in the past, he was meaner. You know what I mean? I'm just saying.
He was probably on the sake, man. His judgment was clouded at that point a little bit. So
This was a work lunch. Okay.
Oh, okay. He was probably still on the
We were
sake,
with
man.
coworkers. We had gone across the street to the sushi place that everyone loved. No.
Oh. Well, hell. All right. I am sad the crab are disappearing. Hopefully they come back. I seen another documentary I watched recently called Artificial. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's kind of talking about like the impact of us essentially putting all of our hatchery-born fish into the ocean to live with wild fish, and like the disease running rampant, the decline of the natural population, all these crazy things that happen when man tries to intervene. And I hope this isn't another phase of that. Hope the crab come back. Hope our fish recover. Even if Eric don't like crab, I like crab. And they are a sign of our ecosystem's health.
Yeah.
So when they disappear, it's kind of alarming.
I am a fan of a healthy ecosystem.
There we go.
All right.
There we go.
Matter of fact, I think y'all should just stop serving him as food and we'll have a healthier ecosystem. I don't know.
No, I'm not going that far yet.
That's not how that works. So don't worry about it.
Nope, not on that. All right, cool. Let's dig into some stuff. Exchange. I'm sure you guys have probably seen some of the news articles related to some new Exchange vulnerabilities came out earlier this month. This is very similar to ProxyShell. I think Pinky, you coined it ProxyShell, or maybe ProxyShell 2 or 3, even Proxier.
That to be fair, that was Tom on our team. He came up with that. I just stole it. So yeah.
Yeah.
In my
Even Proxier,
notes,
though.
in my notes, I just have it named proxy something. So that's what I'm going
Yeah,
to call it.
I think Pinky called out. One of the researchers tried to coin this as not ProxyShell, which was really confusing to me because
Proxy
the
not
exploit.
shell, wasn't it?
Yeah, that stuck too. Yeah, proxy not shell. All the articles now, or proxy not log on, I think is what he
Oh,
called it.
okay.
And it stuck. And it's it's not it's really confusing. It's definitely a log on. So
Yeah, it seems very similar to what we saw with proxy logon, proxy shell last year. I'm assuming we'll see a similar attack path as we did last year. So we did get out notifications to all our clients. Hopefully everybody on the call received that notification. Pinky did a bomb job of drafting that all up and putting together some good information on the vulnerability, mitigating controls, things you should be doing. So I don't know, Pink, if you want to talk a little bit more about what folks need to be thinking about regarding those vulnerabilities.
yeah, sure. So the big thing too is if you saw our initial notification about it, go back, check the article on the Project Happy site again, or at a minimum, go look at the updated Microsoft article. They've issued mitigations initially, then they reissued mitigations, and they did that at least 3 times. I've not checked this morning to see if there's a new set, but I think we're on like the 4th-ish set of mitigation guidance now. So the original one, well, and to go back, it's kind of a URL based attack, right? Like ProxyShell, proxy logon, you craft a response or a request a certain way. It hits in this case, the auto discover on Exchange, which is almost always publicly available because it's how your phone goes out and finds the Exchange server or your Outlook client, whatever. So it's almost always there. So it's a specially crafted request for that. And then they invoke PowerShell or whatever else they're going to do there. But the Microsoft mitigations were to just sort of update the like the URL rewrite function in Exchange, and basically filter out like PowerShell and a couple of other common things. And that was cool until the attackers realized they could just encode the commands and they would pass through. So now the mitigations include like a spot for that encoded command, that encoded URL, and so that's how they're kind of stopping that now. And that seems to have been effective, at least so far from what I've seen. I don't think there have been major changes to that part of it. There have just been some other steps have been added in there. But yeah, essentially a web-based attack is the easier way to put this. Did note there was some guidance out there that was interesting, right? So it does look like it requires authentication. But like I think we noted in the article there, like how confident are you that you have no compromised accounts in your environment? I bet you're not that confident. So it could be any authentication, doesn't have to be an admin account or anything like that. And then there was some guidance out there too about disabling PowerShell remoting. Though that's a great idea, you should do that anyway. It's a little bit of a weird one with this. Unless I'm missing something, I don't know if you guys caught anything you're reading. I don't see how PowerShell remoting is involved in this. It's all web-based type stuff. So I'm not sure how they're doing, how they're linking that together. Again, go ahead and disable that. That's a great plan. You don't want that on your Exchange server publicly available anyway. But some of the guidance we saw suggested that if that was turned off, that you were safe, and I just don't think that's the case.
Yeah, unfortunately, I haven't been able to dig in too much about the actual bug itself, the actual execution of the exploit. Unfortunately, I got out of town for a week and then catch up, right? But I'm curious, because you did say you went and confirmed that authentication is required. What form is the authentication? Is like a token?
So yeah, I can't remember exactly how they. So there's funny enough, they didn't really update a whole lot about that as far as how the authentication is passed. But I want to say it is part of that URL request, right? You drop in an account and a password, and you go with that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just curious, like thinking it through, like how is MFA still a thing, right? Like in this process, does it still matter, right? Do you have to fully authenticate username and password, MFA, get the token back, and then use that token to submit a thing or something? Like however this is all configured, who knows? But
yeah, we haven't got to see one in the wild yet either, so I've not been able to see like what the encoded requests look like either, and then so I don't know. It's all been theoretical so far. I know there have been some people hit. Initially, it looked like it was mostly high value targets, so they weren't really hitting a lot of folks, and so we've not actually got to work any cases of this to see how it works. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I'm curious if you can just bypass MFA with this, or if it requires it. I will say with the way auto discover works, you may be able to get past MFA because it kind of serves up some information prior to authentication normally. So it may be something with that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think there's been any documentation regarding MFA. We have seen like other features in like Exchange before where MFA bypass is possible. So I'm with you. I think it's still unclear at this point. As far as like PowerShell goes, not specifically PowerShell remoting, but I do know the RCE vulnerability does abuse PowerShell for that code execution. Can I talk? The one key I think for everybody to understand as well is that the two vulnerabilities that we're talking about primarily, one, there's a server-side forgery request, the others are remote code execution. Microsoft released patches this Tuesday. Those are still unpatched. So I want everybody to understand that even if you are patching as you should, you don't have patches for that yet. They haven't been released. I don't see an ETA of when they expect those to be released at this point. And assuming too, from the history of this vulnerability, I'm hoping Microsoft is really putting a little more time into the patch development to try to fix this once and for all, so it doesn't rear its head again. Would urge everybody to definitely get right on those mitigating controls. And on top of the mitigating controls, I think like, Pink outlined, depending upon how quickly you applied those, if you're applying them today, right, and you didn't do this when we sent the blast out a couple weeks ago, you probably need to do some hunting on that server to look for the existence of remote shells.
Yeah, remote shells is probably the biggest thing that you can definitively hunt for, because it does seem like they're using the same shell they were using with proxy logon or ProxyShell. At least the attacks that have been observed, it's the China chopper shell. Most AVs, EDRs are probably going to detect that at this point, so that is a good thing. But I mean, with anything, those are going to be altered and tweaked, and they could be dropping anything else. That is a good point. And then, kind of like you were mentioning there with the PowerShell, to be clear, yeah, it does in fact use PowerShell, but you're basically invoking the local PowerShell of that
Right.
Exchange box.
Yeah, that's what confused me. I mean, Cliff had sent something into the question and answer too about it requires PowerShell command to alter each user account, but that would seem like it would be a local thing after, like
It is.
after the RCE. So I'm not sure what PowerShell remoting would have to do with it. But again, I'm looking forward to I'm planning on digging into it and getting actually in the weeds with it this weekend. So
Yeah, I haven't seen a POC released yet on it either. So I think if we see that proof of concept and the exploit, that'll probably shed a lot more light. So hopefully when we do have opportunity to get hands on that, or Eric gets some opportunity to figure it out himself because he's that smart, then we'll tell you guys more.
Yeah. I thought there was one out there, but I haven't seen it either. I just remember hearing rumors that there was one out there, but I've not seen where it's at.
Yeah, the only company I know that has the PLC right now is the Vietnamese company that actually disclosed this to Microsoft originally, and I don't believe they've released their PLC publicly yet. It's been disclosed with Microsoft only, from my understanding.
Yeah. And on the hunting side of it too, right? We have some notes in there, I think, in the article, and also too in the Microsoft article. Looking through log files, look for PowerShell in a URL request. In those, like, that's almost never going to be a good thing. But what I've not got to see yet is one of the encoded requests to see how they're doing that encoding, kind of what that looks like, and what you could hunt for there. So I don't have good guidance on that, but yeah, like Oscar said too, just looking for web shells, essentially look for ASPX files, ASP files that shouldn't be there in those directories, that kind of thing. Things
Yeah,
have been created recently.
One effective method is, if anybody's comfortable doing this, is like timelining your box, right? So doing a timeline on the box, looking for file creation events post the discovery of the vulnerability here, and for file creation, see if you've had any new ASPX files that were created in your Exchange server context. And if so, I would investigate each of those for legitimacy. And then there are methods too, which we can help you guys with for, okay, if you find the shell, the next thing is we want to figure out if that shell's been accessed, right? So if they've actually came back for some post-secondary activity. And so, but yeah, start there. Look for the shells. If you find the shells, that's kind of an oh crap moment. We probably need to dig further to make sure they haven't already started secondary actions on the server.
Yep. Do you see you had a question in the chat there about Office 365 Exchange, no action? Yeah, as far as we know, no action required there. Doesn't mean they weren't vulnerable to it at some point in time, but yeah, even if they are, not a whole lot you can do there.
I mean, I think it can make sense, right? Like in the sense that generally, solutions, software, and stuff like that as a service offerings in the cloud are not going to just run on the same type of platform in the same way, the same communications as the actual on-premise product does. So entirely makes sense that it wouldn't be the same in that environment. Obviously can't confirm that they never had an issue with it, but yeah.
For sure. And they also have the opportunity, right, when you have the software as a service. So Microsoft knew about this before we knew, weeks before we knew about this. So they likely are applying any controls needed before they ever go public with this. Another thing to touch on with Microsoft too is, I don't know if you guys seen this, we don't have to go into details, but there were, in Patch Tuesday this week, there were 15 critical vulns that were addressed. 15. Looks like some of those critical ones were affecting Office, SharePoint, Hyper-V, Windows point-to-point. So PSA there to everybody. I'd probably get on those ASAP.
Yeah, there was one particularly big one in there too, right? There was a CVSS 10 in that was a PrivEsk and remote
That
code
one's still not patched.
execution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's another ODay that came out that affects the comm service. And yeah, it's used for PrivEsk. That's 41033. And that one wasn't patched either yet. So.
Oh, I thought it was in that patch.
Yeah, this one,
I think he's talking about is the Kubernetes one though, the Azure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's another one that came out like this week. That's an ODay related to a PrivEsk attack by abusing comm services, and that one is not patched yet either.
Yeah, the perfect 10 though that was in that list, at least on that page, is that Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters can have a PrivEsk and RCE as a 10 CVSS score. Definitely something to, if you're using that stuff, make sure that you're looking into that one. I didn't get to dig too deep on it, but apparently it requires like knowledge of a randomly generated DNS like subdomain or something off of it, which is interesting that it got a perfect, like I got a CVSS 10 when it requires knowledge that is randomly generated and someone shouldn't have. Would be that's how it seemed, at least, so I wonder if there's like an easy way to get that knowledge or something that allowed it to be rated so high, or maybe it just didn't get considered because sometimes CVSS fails us with lack of consideration.
Yep. Keeping the patch theme alive. I know this isn't on our list, but I've seen this today and just want to share, like Adobe also released a ton of patches this week. And they had a bunch of criticals in there as well that were specifically related to Cold Fusion 2018 and Cold Fusion 2021. So if you guys are using Cold Fusion, I would check that out and get right on that for sure.
I didn't realize Cold Fusion was still as widely used, because
I don't think
it's
footprint.
I don't think it's widely used anymore. But it wasn't that long ago that I'd still see a decent amount of those kind of legacy things, or those things that were using things. So, I mean, I shouldn't say legacy, but things that had been made a while ago. I did just see one though. I did just see like someone's application that was using Cold Fusion like a year and a half ago, so not super far away.
Best I remember, it kind of went away because it was like one big giant security hole. It seemed like it was just constantly having some kind of problem with it. So
yeah, Grant, I mean, I think it's not, but you know how things are. You made it on this thing and now it sticks around for a while.
True. Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, if you ask any modern day developer, I think PHP is also dead, but you still see plenty of it. Oh, Oscar's internet connection's dying.
But yeah, still plenty of PHP out there. Still plenty of legacy PHP as well, right? So like the older versions that we see all the time. Yeah, he is gone, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if that all those sounds were just him saying cool. It was like really stretched out. I think it was, and I'm here for it. Hey, he's back.
Hey, all right. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
No, you should go back and watch this video though when it gets posted, because that sounded like you were giving us some auto tune. Cool. Ooh. It was great.
I've been working on that.
Yeah.
I see that somebody said you look like a frozen Yeti. I think that's fair. That's fair.
Totally fair. I think that's a compliment, maybe.
I think so. I think so.
I mean, I would take it as one for sure.
Absolutely. Oh.
Oh no, we're losing him again.
Yeah. That's what I appreciate about you.
This is going to get really awkward, isn't it? Keep dropping him.
Yeah, he's back.
No,
He's back. I see his face.
Okay.
back.
All right, cool.
So
you might want to turn on video.
Oh, Anthony, I don't have dial-up in the woods. I have a hamster that runs on a wheel and he generates electricity for my router, and he's tired today. He's really tired.
Great stuff.
Cool.
You
Let's
sound
dig
better
into the
now that your
Fortinet
video's
stuff then.
off, at least. So.
All right, good deal. If I get choppy, just poke me and let me know.
Yep.
So Fortinet's back in the news again as well with another authentication bypass critical vulnerability. It seems a lot like a lot of the previous critical vulnerabilities we've seen with Fortinet devices. There is a POC out there for this one as well. Exploit doesn't seem to be that hard. It reminds me, of like the Fortinet vulnerability from 2018 that essentially allows trivial exploit to identify all users and passwords and groups that are authenticated on the device. And so we still see those in the wild. I know these are a lot of these Fortinet devices are like MSP controlled. They're not always great at quickly patching those. And so, yeah, I think this is one you got to get right on. I don't know. Pink, you did a Hafi article on this one as well. I'm sure you've got more details to share with us.
I mean, not a lot. It was kind of the same thing. Like, yep, it's another Fortinet RC or authentication bypass. Sorry, authentication bypass vulnerability. I mean, I feel like we see one of these pretty often, and I don't want to trash on any particular device or anything, but it's just a lot, and huge impact too, right? I think the article was saying at the moment there's 100,000 of those that show up on Shodan that would be potentially vulnerable. So pretty wide impact. Yeah, definitely want to get on it. I'm glad there's at least a patch out there for it.
I'm just tired of vulns like this existing. I'll be honest, like if we have anyone who's even remotely related to development listening to this, can you, like, if you're ever developing something and you're thinking, well, okay, but we don't want someone to have to log in when they're running a report or they're changing something internally. That's not good user experience. So how about we just backdoor our own application with a few checks that will probably someone will find a way to bypass later on. That'll make it easy. Just don't do that, please. Like, there's so many applications, there's so many kind of general configurations of things and default configs of things that, like, internally they just let you go to a page and you can administrate. We need to get away from that, In this particular case, the Fortinet thing is like, it checks to see if it came from 127.0.0.1 and if it came from a trusted user agent, and has some I was reading about it, and there's like 2 user agents it trusts. One was like Node.js and one was Report Runner. And the Node.js, I'm not positive it was Node.js, but it was something like that. And that one had more checks, but the Report Runner didn't have any additional validation checks. So as long as it says it's from 127.0.0.1 and your user agent is Report Runner, you could just go ahead and access that admin interface, no problem. Just hard code it in our own back door. Beautiful, love it. So people need to knock that off. It was one thing for a while, but I feel like now in 2022 we need to move. We need to get past this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I looked at the POC too, the same thing. It was just kind of mind-blowing that exists to begin with. And then their exploit path to gain admin was like, literally you can create an SSH key and link that to the admin that you own, and then you have access as the admin user. So yeah, full control to trivial exploit.
Yeah, and like you were saying too, these are not going to get patched. I mean, they just don't. Like, there's always such a delay on these for patching. Like you were saying earlier, the vulnerabilities we saw last year or the year before, we're still seeing those out there, like in huge numbers. So, yeah, it's just kind of scary.
To be clear, I mean, Fortinet has released a patch, but
Yeah,
you're saying that people don't patch their machine or their devices fast enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it. It's likely disruptive. These are usually on your edge. They're serving your internet and a bunch of different connections. You don't want to take that thing down, but I mean, this is where building in some redundancy and having maintenance windows and things like that are really critical, because you need to get these patches out there. You're just kind of asking for it if you don't. Because these devices are in fact on the edge. They're usually accessible. I assume with this one though, if you're locking down your admin page to only internal IPs, you're probably good.
Yeah, I think it's all in the management portal.
Yeah.
It affects FortOS, FortiProxy, and FortiSwitch Manager. But yeah, you have to have that management portal publicly accessible for public abuse.
And nobody does that, right? No one on this call does that.
I hear fingers tapping frantically.
I mean, on the note of, people not patching the systems, I mean, do you guys think it's getting harder in the sense that, I mean, like, I do, this is like a total tangent. We're gonna BS in the middle of our thing. But
No,
I
this is
mean,
good.
the reality is like, I feel like, and maybe it's not the truth, but I feel like more than ever, we have more and more critical vulnerabilities and things like that we're hearing about. There's more, whether there actually is or not. I do feel like there's a higher saturation in anything that provides news in these ways, right? Or about these things. I mean, about security, right? There's a higher saturation. There's a lot more stuff to have to know, and to like pay attention to and to realize are out there. So do you think that a lot of these things, like, yeah, there's a lot of people running Fortinet stuff, but it's now just a needle in a haystack, right? To even know that this is a thing.
Yeah, I mean, just thinking back to days as an admin, right? I mean, I think we've talked about this on here before, but you're just trying to make everything work, right? And you're just trying to keep things going. If there's not a problem, you're probably not looking at that device. And if you're responsible for, a full network of devices, and maybe you've just got a little Fortinet device hanging out on the end out there somewhere that you don't know about, and it's hard to keep up with all that. I mean, I know they're not paying as much attention to security articles and that type of thing as someone who works in security. So I think you're probably right there. That's probably a good reason why it gets missed. It's just, yeah, exactly that needle in the haystack type thing.
I mean, even we're in a situation where you said, I have this asset inventory of all these things that are externally available. I mean, at what rate do you check to go, do these need updates? I mean, not daily, right? But like, is it weekly? Is it monthly? Like how, I mean, even then you have enough of an access window for someone to get into your stuff. If you did it monthly, you said monthly, I'm going to check every single, edge device I have to make sure it doesn't have any critical vulnerabilities and I need to patch it and stuff like that. I mean, that would be a lot for somebody if they were wearing every hat in a place, you know what I mean? And even then that wouldn't be enough, right? So it's tough.
Yeah, most of those too. I mean, I honestly, some of the better ones I've seen have been quarterly for those types of devices, your edge
Mhm.
devices. And, usually if people are doing it quarterly, I'm impressed. So yeah, monthly or checking weekly is just almost out of the question. And that's, like you said, it's plenty of time to get exploited.
Do we need to make a piece of software that lets you put in all your devices and automatically checks the news for all of your devices, your edge devices, and lets you know if there's a new alert?
I think so.
Did I just come up with a genius idea?
I think
Am I
you
rich?
Yeah.
did. Seems like it wouldn't be that hard to build either. So
Can
yeah.
we put that on our R&D roadmap? I think that's a great idea. I do think it's like with patching like these edge devices in familiar. I can remember back in the old days, like people were afraid of patching these devices because back then there wasn't a lot of control. It was a very manual process. And so like, for example, I've a lot of background in Cisco. There's no checks, for example, if Cisco releases an OS update to say like, hey, do you have enough memory on your device to support this upgrade? And so like, we've bricked some devices that way. Hey, let's go and apply our patches and our update OS this weekend during our approved maintenance window. And then guess what? You don't have enough memory. Then you just bricked your device and you have to rebuild that and start all over. So I think a long time ago, like, and probably a lot of network admins that still are managing these devices remember those days, and they're a lot more hesitant to just say, hey, there's a patch, let me go apply. On the flip side of that though, I think we've gotten a lot better at being able to put in safe checks. Even a lot of edge devices can now implement auto updates to your devices as long as you approve those updates, and so it is getting better. But I still agree, like if you think about just the pattern that we've observed in the last almost 2 years now, the frequency at which more and more critical O days are being released. And even if you got a badass patching policy in place where you're doing it once a month, that's a huge attack window, especially when we consider like the frequency at which these are being exploited. Like that POC drop today for this, I guarantee you right now, people are scraping Shodan for every device, spraying and praying with that POC to see how many devices they can get access to. And they're going to hold on to that and use it for later to sell it to someone else.
And it's an
Yep.
easy exploit. It's one that can be shotgunned so simply.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Did I hear you correctly, Oscar, that you said you've bricked network devices before? Or were you speaking of the grander we, like, you know, people
Oh,
have done
yeah.
that? No,
Yeah.
I know I've certainly never done that, ever.
Yeah,
not
I've never.
once.
I've seen some dummy I worked
Yeah.
with do it, and I was like, "Pfft, look at this guy. I don't know what he's doing, noob." Those old Cisco updates were scary, man. I don't
They
know how
were.
many people on our call remembers that, but every time I had to update like network infrastructure devices, it was like I was pretty tense that weekend.
Yep.
And then they would, sometimes just randomly change their syntax structure and your previous config no longer applies. And guess what? I applied this patch. Sweet, I'm patched, but now I have to go completely rebuild my config. Awesome.
Yeah. Now we're all just.
Yeah, Brian's been there for sure.
Yeah, so now we're all just in a dark place. We're gonna need to talk about
Just
crab
the
legs again or
history of
something.
patching in general, right? Like,
Yeah.
not even just on devices or like updating in general. I mean, how many times, like luckily nowadays it's a lot easier. It still happens, right? Where like if you're a developer or something like that and a library you use gets an update, it used to be far more often that would deprecate so many things you use to the point where you're like, I'm not updating anything ever. Why would I do that? Like it has to rewrite my code, Nowadays it's better. It still happens, but generally it's better. So
yeah.
All right. So I think we did solve this for everyone. Eric's going to create a really cool tool that auto correlates.
Well, I think it has to be a
feeds
service, right? Like you got to have a website, you go in, you sign up, you put in your stuff, and it alerts you by sending you emails or something, right? Because if I made it like just a quick Python tool that did it, you're not going to run it or keep it running, right? So we have to actually have like a service with no subscription fee, just free, right? Because that's how the world works.
Yep. Love it.
It'd be cool. It'd be a cool service. I mean, as long as it wasn't
I think it'd be great.
Extortionate in price or something, right? Like it'd be
Right.
cool. That's right. Subscription with a $sign.
That's right. All right. It's another sidetrack. I meant to talk about this early on. Hacks and Hops was awesome last week. It was really cool getting to see some of our folks here in the crowd and get to chat with you guys. Pinky, we missed you a whole lot. But I hope everybody who's here with us today that was able to attend enjoyed that. And got to give a shout out to our marketing team, man. They did an awesome job. Pinky, we got to go on the field at US Bank Arena and like kick footballs and pass the ball around. It was.
I know. I heard there were some arguments too, but or at least some light heckling. I'll call it that. But yeah, I heard it was awesome. I talked to a few folks that were there. It's funny. I was doing some work with some people who were on site there and calling in from the stands, and they kind of spun their camera around to show me where they were at. It's pretty cool, but it sounded awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, there was some arguing. I don't know, Eric, if we should even bring that up now. We'll save that for later. But maybe we'll just poll our audience.
I don't even recall what we're talking about right now.
It's probably talking about me and you and Seth.
Oh no, I think this was somebody else. I don't even think you guys were involved in this. I think somebody else. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
What do we argue about? Now I'm confused what you're talking about.
You don't remember a conversation that lasted way too long? About hot.
I did not think he was referencing that in any way. I thought he was talking about something that happened at the stadium. That happened like at a totally different situation in an Uber. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I was talking more light heckling for people who were trying to kick field goals and that kind of thing. Yeah, man. No, I had no idea of this other story, but now I want to know. So
yeah, we'll save that. We don't want to open that up yet. Hey, but real quick, Eric, how tall do you think Pinky is?
Pinky? It's like Pinky's tall. I don't know.
Yeah.
He's like,
I'm gonna guess he's like 6'3".
6'5", 6'4", something like that. Pink, how tall are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm 6'2".
The only Pinky here. You're only 6'2"?
Yeah.
You always wear like really tall boots and stuff.
I'm always wearing cowboy boots, so I'm like 6'2" normally. I'm like 6'4", 6'5" with
dude's like 6'4" when you're actually standing in front of him. That's for sure.
All right, moving on.
That, though.
Yeah, now I'm really curious. This is I have no
Look,
idea how this
all
really
you all need to know is that we found out through very casual, friendly debate that at least us, maybe all of mankind, maybe all of humankind, are really bad at judging other people's heights, and all think they're taller than the other person when they're the same height or
Yep.
close to the same height. Like if it's one thing if someone's like a foot shorter than you, you're like, yeah, no, they're shorter than me, right? Like it's 100%. But if you're all around the same height, get in a conversation about this sometime. Be like, who's taller? How tall is that
Yeah.
person? I was all because it ended up being the stupidest conversation. I mean, the stupidest conversation ever, I think. Like to the point where we got out of an Uber, walked over to a sidewalk, and Oscar was demanding that we back-to-back measure up right now.
Oh yeah, I did that.
Oh man. Yeah, now I'm really sad I didn't go.
Yeah.
No, you wouldn't have been in it because I don't know. Maybe I would have thought I was taller than you. We'll see.
Oh, Oscar would have been yelling at you to take your boots off.
yeah,
for
that,
He'd
sure.
have
that's
been like,
how
well,
that
no,
happened.
take your boots off. Back to back, take
Yeah.
your boots off. Trust me.
Oh man. All right, security stuff again. Article released this week from Dark Reading, which shouldn't come to a surprise to any of us, is that email defenses are under siege as phishing attacks dramatically improved. Made a note here, like who's surprised by this? No one. I think we've been seeing that. We expect those attacks will continue to evolve as our defense systems get better. This isn't nothing new, but they did give some interesting statistics right now that nearly 1 in 5 phishing emails are able to bypass Microsoft's platform defenses. And this article was kind of heavily focused on those Microsoft defenses, which I think is fair. I think a lot of people use those as their primary source of detection and defense against phishers. But yeah, understand that about 20% of those today on average are reaching your end users.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in that conversation, one of the important things, I mean, I think you're right. I think people do use Microsoft as a kind of a baseline for or Google Cloud, whatever. Whatever email service they're using, I think they use that as like, oh, what does it let through? I think it's a really tough conversation to have though, because when you look at someone like Microsoft or Google, they kind of have to they have to have good user experience, right?
Mhm.
And then so they have to let through more than than you might necessarily care to let through. I feel like by default it's more of a, hey, we're going to do our best to block the things we know you don't want, but like there's fuzzy areas that are going to get through.
Mhm.
And that's kind of your due diligence to put in some other things, put in some other layer or something, right? Or training and various other things too, because yeah, I mean at some point you get to a place where it's like now it's blocking all these things that are legitimate as spam, and that's, or not spam, but malicious, and that's not tenable either for a situation, right? I need to get that email. I missed that deal. I could have sold that, but I didn't get the email because you thought it was malware.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, I mean, training is really your best option, right? That's the best you can do here. I did see there were some neat techniques being used, at least that they were discussing in the article too, about so the dynamic URL. It's presented one way as it passes through the filter, then gets presented to the user a different way. I thought that was pretty neat. I don't think I've really seen that in practice, but kind of a neat concept. But yeah, I mean, there's a million ways to get around those phishing filters and things like that, and spam filters, and we see it all the time. I mean, we probably work more business email compromise cases than anything else, and almost all of those people have something in place that should be stopping this stuff as it comes through. So yeah, kind of with Oscar's initial assessment there of, yeah, not particularly surprised that this is happening, and it's going to get better, right? I mean, better from the attacker perspective, not better from the victim perspective, but um, I don't know how, this is just something I was thinking about as I was going through here, is, I know a lot of folks kind of advertise their filter system, right? So you'll get a reject email or something and it'll say, hey, this is Proofpoint or, Momcast or whatever. Or they're using cloud services where their MX record points out to, protectionmicrosoft.com, which is normal, and there's nothing you can do about that in that one in particular. But if you're using like a cloud-based filter or something, my thought is if there's a way to at least obfuscate that a little bit, might help some. Because I know just talking to like Eric's team and stuff when we're doing purple team engagements, it's really helpful for them to know which email filtering system you're using, so they can kind of
Yeah.
tweak those.
I think the nature of it is if you gotta have MX records, you gotta have something to point something somewhere, right? Unless it happens after the fact, like unless there was a filter where it's like, well, it goes to Microsoft first, then it gets it to a filter, and then it comes back into Microsoft, right? Which is like not the way it's working. But if it worked that way, then it would be obfuscated. But I think that's the only way is you could obfuscate it with layers, right? Some kind of blind layer that said, you know, it's using something, but you don't know what it is. It goes to that something and then it ends up somewhere else. Otherwise, I mean, you have to have records to handle something. And so thus, and even if someone changed up their URL for their filtering service, people would figure it out, right? So,
I think the key, like Pink already hit here, is I talk about a lot, is like training is the key. Educating your users on how to identify those phishing emails, making sure they know how to report those. And that's a big thing that we see. Some people may just say like, oh, I got this email, I know what to do with it, I'm not going to click that link, I'm going to delete it and move on. But it's important for our users to understand that, you know, that reporting serves a purpose, and that purpose is to say like, who else in the organization got the email, and it gives your Exchange admins or your security team an opportunity to say, well, not only who got it, let's purge that email, but let's see who clicked the link, right? Let's see how many people fell victim, let's see how many people downloaded the attachment and interacted with that, so that you can be a little more proactive and preventing those secondary actions by the attacker in the state. Yeah, the 0-point obfuscation attack too. That's one thing I know they're using to get by, where essentially attackers use 0-point fonts to break up strings that would typically flag those systems to evade that detection. It's a pretty cool technique. I'm also surprised that one is still working because it's like 4 years old, right? I think 2018 is when we first started seeing that attack being used. So kind of surprising, but I guess it is hard to really defend that without, like, you know, you guys have mentioned breaking legitimate emails and preventing those messages that need to get through the system.
Yeah, I think it's tough too, because there's a few different ways to handle it, right? So it's like you work into that situation where I think if you want to try to block something like that, you have to kind of approach it like web application firewalls do, right? It's like just a deny list, or not so much a deny list for things, but more kind of saying like, if we see this and then this is in that and it's handled this way, you know what I mean? Like, but kind of a deny of a circumstance, and it gets a little tough, I think, to properly do, because you're kind of fighting a losing battle generally when you're working with deny lists, right?
Yep. Real quick, I see Jason asked if my mom used a ruler in the back-to-back. My mom was not there, but if we would have had a ruler, we would have definitely used that. So
probably to smack you with, right? I mean,
yeah.
It wouldn't have
Being
mattered.
unreasonable.
Oscar was cheating the whole time, so it doesn't matter.
I call shenanigans.
Just to go back to this conversation, my favorite part by far of the entire thing was that,
I know what you're gonna say, and I agree.
I don't know if you do, but anyway, honestly, my favorite part, what made me smile the most and laugh the hardest, was when we're in the car and we first started talking about it, and Oscar was like, how tall do you think I am? And I was like, I'm like 6'1", and he's like, okay. And then as soon as he says okay, Seth starts yelling, no shot, like, just in complete disbelief. Our Uber driver was probably like, what are you guys doing? We were in an Uber, right? Like, or were you driving? No, you were driving.
No, I was driving. Yeah,
it was not an Uber. You were driving, because I was like, that would have been ridiculous. Yeah. We Ubered later. Yeah, that was fantastic. I was honestly just like laughing, like I really kind of don't care, but it was getting kind of funny, and I was just like, yeah, let's keep doing this for sure.
I've still laughed about that multiple times since we did that. I was telling my wife the story like this week, and just she was rolling at us again, like, dumbasses. Oh man.
The funny thing about it is that, like, I genuinely did think the things I said were accurate, but I also was like, not so much that I would be like, oh, you're wrong. I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna fight for it. I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm wrong, you know. But I wasn't like 100% adamant that there were things, but there were things I believed, and then I was proven wrong. So,
well, I laughed too the next morning. We were getting in the Uber or in the car to go to the office, and you were like, you study something you'd read about how like people can grow an inch overnight because your body relieves stress. Kind of.
Yeah, well,
and then
you know, gravity.
Yeah.
on your body compresses you throughout the day, right? So when you sleep and you get up in the morning, you're going to actually technically, I mean, be a little bit taller than when you went to bed. And I was just bringing that up because this topic came back up, and Oscar like immediately thought I was like making some excuse. He was like, "Oh my god, here we go again." And I'm like, "No, I'm just saying like fun fact around the topic. People are taller in the morning generally, you know."
Yeah, just so you guys know, when a bunch of security guys get together, we don't actually talk about security stuff. This is the stuff that
No,
happens, right? Yeah,
gosh, no.
it's just that kind of nonsense.
Every Thursday, our technical teams get together and we just kind of like socialize, and we spend our time socializing by looking at Reddit, food related subreddits, and just talking about that, or animal rescue in reverse, which is still one of the best. We did that yesterday, and that was great.
Oh yeah, that's fantastic.
To tie it
All
back
right,
into
so
security, I was just going to say people are generally bad at judging things, right? Judging your security posture, judging phishing emails, that kind of thing, right? So there we go. We tied it back in.
yeah, perception, our self-perception often fails us.
Sure. That
Our
is the
perception of
lesson.
self and
That's
others.
why we brought up the whole height thing, was that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like there was a purpose. We structured this. We planned this whole episode actually is just completely
It's
scripted.
100%. I'm just reading off the script over here as we go.
Mhm. Yeah, we spend a lot of time doing that. All right, one more thing, and then we'll bounce into the weekend. Emotet's back from the dead just in time for Halloween. I told you guys it was a spooky October here. I think we talked about it on the show last year sometime. I don't remember when, but there was a law enforcement takedown of Emotet infrastructure, and we all kind of predicted, like, yeah, it's a short-term band-aid. They'll be back. They'll be back better than they were before. And sure enough, yeah, Emotet's back in the wild with all sorts of new features, it appears.
Yeah, 139 major variations in it, which I think are all just in the just as I was reading on through that, it looks like that's in the program chains that can be used for execution.
Mhm.
But that's a lot. That's a lot more to detect and figure out. That's a lot. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, Emotet, man. Like, traditionally we've been great at detecting Emotet, at least for to brag on my team a little bit. Uh, in some ways excited to see it come back so we get to tangle with it again, but in other ways really sad to see it come back because it's pretty gnarly and it usually leaves a pretty good trail of destruction.
Yeah, for everybody to remember, like, it is malware as a service platform, right? I know that typically first steps are email. And so going back to phishing ties right back into our previous conversation about perception, right? But yeah, likely the first point of ingress into your environment is going to be through an email. Same old stuff, trying to get someone to open a doc, interact with a doc, or click a link to go somewhere. Um, Typically, the mummy spotters, the APT, which is a perfect Halloween themed APT name as well. They're going to gain that initial access into your environment, and then they typically are selling that access, right? So they gain the foothold. They're going to target high value clients, or really anyone they get, and then try to sell that access to other folks who may be interested in stealing the data you're hosting, or ultimately ransoming your environment and trying to get payout there.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. They were talking about how that in so there was the like you said, the law enforcement takedown, and then late in 2021 they were seeing folks have the initial infection be TrickBot, and then TrickBot they would use that to bring in Emotet. I know in cases we worked in the past, it was the opposite of that. It was Emotet first, then they brought in TrickBot as a secondary. So that was kind of an interesting little twist on that. They're both very similar in how they operate. Just some a few differences in ways to detect them and that kind of thing. But yeah, they're almost always there for ransomware cases. I know it's technically, if you go look it up, it's listed as a banking Trojan, and they do have like credit card stealing modules and things like that in there, but it's typically used for much worse.
I got nothing really to add to any of that,
Oh, okay. Well, then
but I love hearing you talk about it.
all right. Well, I'll keep going then. So yeah, I mean, I do enjoy talking about Emotet just because we saw it so much, and it is really pretty rowdy. I'm curious about this new version. I'd like to see. I'd like to kind of dig into it and see how it works. The older one was really kind of neat in the way that it would. So it'd be usually an 8-character string, like randomly generated string, .exe. Um, it would then spread It changes its hash when it spreads. It's one of the polymorphic ones. But then what it would leave behind would be another executable with the same file name. So if you went to go, it's like if you're following your EDR path and you go to pull down that file, try to get a sample of it, it was almost always the calculator. It was calc.exe. So that was,
yeah, I remember that.
yeah, it was really fun the first few times we saw it, because we'd pull that down, we'd grab the hash and throw that into, virus total or somewhere like that. And it would just come back that this is the Windows calculator. It's like, what is going on here? So that was kind of neat. It's really good at spreading. Usually it spreads before it's ever detected. It looks like the new version added even additional lateral movement capabilities. It was already really good at this, so even better now, probably.
Do you know at what stage it replaces itself with calculator? Do you know? Is
It
it like? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looked like on spread, whenever it would jump to another host, through, it used SMB at the time. I'm not sure what it's doing now, but it looked like, at least from what we could tell in the chain, when it did that, it would change its name, and it may even still be on that machine, just under a new name. It just it was a little bit strange in how it did that. I don't know if that was meant to be, or if that was just kind of it got stuck or something, but
Gotcha.
it's different.
Because there's like some different methods for trying to obscure executables, on disk and stuff like that. Like one of them off the top of my head that comes to mind is like process herpaderping, which has a fantastic name. And essentially, like, the way it works is, and I'm going to get this wrong, so please don't quote me on any of it. But what it'll do is it writes, like, it opens a file handle, right? Writes the malware to the file, then maps that into memory and executes, but doesn't close the file handle, and then overwrites the file with the current open file handle with something that's benign, like calculator or whatever, and then finally closes the file handle. And so a lot of the time most of the time with like API hooks and stuff like that, things trigger once the file is saved. You don't constantly do it as the file, like as it's being modified live, right? Because there would be too much resource taken by all the different things trying to do that. So they trigger off of different things, right? And so essentially you're able to write the stuff to disk, map it to memory, execute it, and then like overwrite it and save it, and then it triggers the actual API kind of close out, right? And then things scan it and they're like, oh, this thing that just ran is fine. So
yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, it does kind of sound like what it would be doing, right? Because its sort of goal is to spread, but then also it's gonna do some services and things like that for the command and control functions of it. But that would make sense that it kind of runs through those processes, kind of uses calc for that, and then drops the calc back in. So
I've definitely never done anything like that.
No, I'm sure.
I've never used calc.exe specifically in every instance that I've ever done that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And with this one anyway, I'm curious if this is kind of how you did it as well, but it would drop that version of calc into like the local roaming, or the local Microsoft app data folder. Sorry. Yeah, that's what the app data directories were used to drop it all the time.
Yeah.
Just because no one looks there for anything.
Yeah. Doesn't matter. Drop it somewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
Drop it like it's hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. All right, guys. I think it's a wrap for today.
Can I say one last thing before we go?
Yeah.
Thank you for everyone who's watching who did come to Hacks and Hops and walked up to me and talked about watching this and how cool it was. It was awesome.
It was really awesome. And I have heard from a couple folks too. I've been traveling this week as well. I'm just getting back in the saddle again here. So if you've hit me up and I haven't hit you up back yet, I'll be doing that over the weekend here. And I appreciate all your support and all your awesomeness.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give that out as well. I had like 5 people reach out to me on LinkedIn over the last weekend, and I haven't replied to them yet. I'm not ghosting you if you're one of them. I just haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks to you guys for another awesome show, and we will see you guys in a month. Adios.
Bye, everybody.
Well, that was weird.
That was weird. It's still recording too.